she's absent tonight.
David Bell.
Yep.
Chris Blackstone also.
She's also absent tonight.
Sam Penny.
Present.
Julianne Tyson.
Here.
Jeff Coleman.
Present.
Tom Jones.
Here.
Paul Nelson.
Here.
Great, and since we have two regular members absent, I will appoint Colin and Tom as voting members tonight. Any public comments?
I might have a lot of
Our
notes.
two people are speaking later, so we will move right into, does anybody need an agenda?
I have.
I've got one.
What's that?
We're good.
Great. Okay, so we are going to jump into our guest speaker tonight. Dr. Gabriella Brott is from UNH, a Fisheries Extension Specialist at New Hampshire Sea Grant and UNH Extension. She's focused on New Hampshire fishing and seafood industries, as well as citizen science on invasive green crabs and microplastics on beaches. And tonight, Gabby's going to talk to us about microplastics on New Hampshire beaches and what we've learned. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
being a person too, that's great.
And I went to the fire station. I was like, where is everybody? And then I asked for, town hall directions, and they sent me to Durham. I'm like, this is not okay. So, I come by this all the time. I just never noticed. Sorry. So, well, thank you for having me. And I'll just jump right in. So I did want to give you a little background on what Sea Grant and UNH Cooperative Extension does. Mainly, I have a double appointment with New Hampshire Sea Grant, which is part of NOAA, and UNH Cooperative Extension. And I basically do outreach and education on the most current research that is being conducted in the state, in the nation, and at UNH that has any relevance to our fishing industry and our aquaculture industry here in New Hampshire. We are non-advocacy, so oops, I didn't do it. What happened here?
What happened?
Did it fall asleep?
Yeah.
Huh, wake up. I don't know. Yeah. Well, in any case, so we provide scientific and evidence-based information, and then we take that information from our researchers and whatever else is going on that is relevant, and we extend it to our stakeholders. I'm part of the Sustainable Fisheries and Aquaculture focus area for both Extension and Sea Grant, and what we really focus on in this area is we work really closely with our local fishing industry, and in many different respects. So, I'll pause.
Sorry.
That's okay. Ta-da! Thank you. And so a lot of the things that I have been working on recently has been to work with our local fishermen on direct marketing of seafood. So, and also of trying to teach consumers how to sort of extend their palate, right, in terms of different flavors. So getting them to eat weird things like green crabs and seaweed and so on and so forth, and a lot of underutilized fish species. So we work a lot with not only the harvesters, but also with chefs and other seafood industry members. We also talk a lot about gear technology, innovation, and research. We do a lot of workshops with the fishing industry and management. We also work with policy and regulatory issues, which I don't know if you've heard, but there's a lot in the lobster industry lately. And we're also working a lot with aquaculture initiatives such as cultivating seaweeds and oysters, etc. We do coastal conservation, and then some of the stuff that I have been working on for a long time is looking at marine debris issues in the state, and that includes microplastics and sort of citizen science and monitoring and derelict fishing gear. What is being done in New Hampshire, just a really brief thing, I just talked about derelict fishing gear removal. I'm not sure if you guys are aware that our local lobstermen every year will do a coast-wide beach cleanup. So in terms of getting all of their derelict traps off of the beaches and so on, and it's every April, and they remove something like, I don't know, 10 tons every year of lost and abandoned traps. And a lot of them is really is just because of the weather and nor'easters, and they get hung up and so on. And so they really do try to do their best to keep it and get it off the beaches. And if you ever do see any on the beaches, don't touch them because they are not, it's illegal. So you call Fish and Game and say, hey, there's an abandoned trap, and can you come pick it up, etc. I also work really closely with Blue Ocean Society for Marine Conservation on a lot of these projects, and one of them is we do a lot of beach cleanups. They're primarily responsible for tallying up all of that effort, and they've been doing it since 2001, I believe. And then the next thing that we've been working on since 2014 is our beach microplastics monitoring effort. Before I go into that, I'm not sure how much everybody knows about microplastics. I think at this point everybody knows a lot about it, but I will go into it really quickly. It is really the most abundant type of plastic debris in the ocean today, and it seems to be growing every year, more and more and more, no matter how much awareness there is. It seems like it is exploding. And part of it is because of our overuse and dependence on large single-use plastic items that will eventually break down into millions and millions of smaller pieces. Microplastics by the Marine Debris Program of NOAA, the definition of it is 5 millimeters or less. Anything above that is considered a macroplastic, and below 1 millimeter it is considered nanoplastics. So there are two main types of microplastics. We have the primary microplastics, which are microplastics that are actually made intentionally at this size. That includes our plastic pellets called nurdles. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but nurdles are essentially the things that you melt down and mold into every other plastic product that you see. So your water bottles and soda bottles, etc. And then you also have the microbeads that are part of personal care. There are a lot in personal care products. So they are intentionally manufactured this way. And then there's the secondary plastics, which is what a lot of people recently have been working on a lot more diligently, I believe, mostly because they get broken down into smaller and smaller bits. And that comes from plastics made from the nurdles that will eventually break down due to UV breakdown, any other physical breakdown, etc. So don't know if anybody's ever had one of those plastic milk jugs and they found it on the beach. You go to pick it up and it goes bloop. So that's exactly what happens.
What's the time frame for that? I mean, how long does it take for those bigger pieces to just decompose and break up into?
So none of them decompose, but they, I don't think, so for one of those milk jugs, it probably takes about 6 months. And
Fast.
because they become very, very brittle. And so, you just kick it and it breaks down. And in the water, in the ocean, with all of the wave action, et cetera, it breaks down faster. The big issue with the, breaking down is that it doesn't ever go away, right? It's persistent. So even though you can't see it, all of the things that it's been leaching is still there. So, and a lot of those, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the sort of infographics that say a plastic bottle takes 800 years and, things like that. I think that's a little bit hyperbolic because we don't actually know, and it depends on conditions and so on and so forth. But it doesn't actually really matter because they're still here, and so on. So one of the stats that I like to say is that every bit of plastic that's ever been made since the 1950s is still around in some form or another. So, I mean, that's a lot. So, why? Why should we care? Aside from, it is a huge environmental and ecological concern, But primarily it's their size. Their size makes them really accessible, widely accessible to pretty much anything and everything. They readily absorb harmful chemicals such as DDT, PCBs, PBDEs from surrounding seawater, fresh water. It's not just limited, obviously, to the marine environment. And because of their small size, their concentrations are also an issue. So it's really likely, there's a high likelihood that pretty much any organism from zooplankton up to, the right whales, etc., will encounter them and ingest them. And the ingestion of it, even the minute quantities of microplastics, it has been shown, can disrupt physiological processes, and then you can have the cumulative food chain effects. So if, you're starting to eat fish who just ate something else that had microplastics, then, sort of trickle down effect. But pretty much any organism that is on Earth will probably actually have microplastics in it, including ourselves. And that's the, the sort of really challenging part about dealing with something that is so pervasive. It's like, okay, well, at what point, what are the limits? What are the thresholds of whether this is benign or whether it's going to actually be, at least in terms of humans, when is that really going to affect us? I don't actually think that it is, it takes too much. I think persistent exposure, which we now all have, is, probably cumulative, and we don't even know really how, in terms of health effects, how much it takes for an effect to happen. And people are still studying that in every sort of model organism that they can get their hands on.
It's kind of scary.
It is.
It's like, well, how do we know then?
And it's so hard to tease apart, right? Because you're like, well, is it because I drank from a water bottle for, my whole adult life? Or is it because I have, the flame retardant stuff on my couches? Or is it because I use nonstick pans to make my food? It's just sort of pretty much everywhere. When you start thinking about that, it's super scary. And you're like, okay, well, what do I do about it? Maybe I just use, eat with my fingers or something
We
and
like
cook
to
over
eat
a fire.
fish. It's like, are we not eating fish anymore?
Well, so that is actually a really good question. And as a fisheries biologist and specialist, I have to, and I work with fishermen and aquaculturists really closely, and I have to really walk that line and say, be aware, but actually it's, how do you sort of preempt any of these, or how do you, assuage some of these concerns? And a lot of, if you're talking about fish, how often are you really eating fish stomachs? I mean, as far as we know right now, they're not accumulating in the tissue. So if they're really just sort of hanging out in the stomachs, then maybe perhaps it's not leaching out in, sufficiently harmful levels. And same with oysters. There's been a lot of work that's been done recently to try, and they basically have force-fed, little tiny plastic pellets to oysters to see how quickly they can filter them out and what the effects of it. And at the concentrations that they're using for these experiments, yes, they've seen all of these effects. They have reproductive issues. The larvae don't settle. I mean, there's so much. It's in the tissues. They've counted out. They're like, if you eat X number of oysters, you've probably just ingested like 1,000 pieces of microplastic. This is for sort of, making a point. But, if I were to tell my oyster growers, like, actually, people are not worried that you're feeding them microplastic, not necessarily the case. So, you really have to tread carefully there.
Yeah.
But part of the reason, actually, that the New Hampshire Beach Microplastics Project came to being was around 2014. And I had just, I'd been working with Blue Ocean Society on the beach cleanups and stuff, and I was talking to Jen Kennedy, who's the executive director, and we're, cleaning up, and she's like, we've been doing this since 2001, and people are getting kind of, not necessarily complacent, but we're not picking up as much poundage as we used to. Like they used to pick up, so many bags of large debris. And she's like, but I'm noticing we're missing all the small pieces. And maybe a week or so after that conversation, I was out on the beach with my 2 little babies, and what do? They spill their snack and they go and they reach in the sand to pick it up, and they don't grab the goldfish, they grab the cigarette butts and all the other. I'm like, no. So, that's when I was like, maybe we should look into this, especially on New Hampshire's most used beaches. And so we secured a small amount of funding, and I think this is when I met you, Ellen, right around that time, and I was sitting there counting microplastics all the time. But essentially, the goals of this project was, when we started, and you started looking at the literature, there was more lab experiments and not as many in-field, in-situ experiments or research going on, and very little monitoring. And so in order to make any sort of policy recommendations or anything to DES, we're like, we can't say this is a problem, pay attention. We actually had to back that up. So part of it was just to establish sort of a baseline on the presence and impacts of microplastics on our beaches, develop sampling protocols, and then develop capacity. So develop a program that would engage and educate the public on, as well as collect valuable data. And so we also wanted to do this for the long term. So one of our models was the Lake Slay monitoring program that's being done by New Hampshire UNH Cooperative Extension, and that program has been around for almost 50 years. And it's long-term data set that has really been invaluable to the state in terms of policy and management and things like that. So when we started, it was a lot more challenging than we had anticipated. We needed to take into consideration when, where, and how we were going to access these beaches. I thought we were going to sample every single beach in New Hampshire. That wasn't really the case because you don't have access to all of them. So we narrowed it down to the top 5 most recreationally and economically important beaches in New Hampshire. We didn't have very much money, and we had to figure out a citizen science protocol that would keep our volunteers engaged because we are asking for their time. And so the first set of protocols that we developed were taking like 3 hours. So we kept sort of winnowing it down until you could, basically do a beach in about an hour, hour and 15 minutes. So, that took a while. And then also trying to get enough samples throughout the year in order to have any sort of, to see any trends. But we have had in the last 8 years, so this program's been going on for about 8 years. We've had tremendous success as we've perfected the program, et cetera. We've gone through 7,000 gallons of sand that has been collected and processed, about 3,500 samples, really great volunteers. So we've had about 150 rotating volunteers since, for the last 8 years. Lots of hours of sampling in the field, lots of sorting, interns, presentations, articles, protocols that are being adopted in the country as other programs try to implement this kind of work into their plans. We have an exhibit at the Seco Science Center, and to this day, as far as I know, in the United States, this is still the only long-term microplastic monitoring project on beaches. And it actually doesn't even matter if it's just on beaches. There's no other monitoring program that even does sediments or water column work. People are sampling it, but not consistently every year with, over time. So, and there's a reason for that, because it is kind of time consuming and so on and so forth. And it actually takes a while to get any sort of meaningful information, right? So what have we found? So the beaches that are in blue are the ones that all the ones that we attempted, the ones that we actually got good data from consistently since 2014 are Wallace Sands, Genes, Hampton Harbor, and Seabrook Beach. If you look at the top chart, Essentially, it's the average number of microplastics per sample over, and then over time, basically. And what I want, what's not on this slide is sort of the protocol that we have to do. So we basically did, we have 5 sites at every beach, north, south, and 3 in the center. And those sites were picked based on how New Hampshire DES does their water quality sampling at their beaches. So that gave us an idea of, okay, well, this is the points that DES uses. So we'll just get those points and then walk up to the highest high tide line where the rack line is, right? And that's where we would sample. And so the way that we sample is we put a quadrat down, a 1 meter by 1 meter quadrat, and we essentially collect a gallon within that quadrat, the first 2 centimeters, and then of the sand, and then we sift it. And anything that is 5 millimeters and under, we keep, and we will sort that out later. And then, so the first thing to note, so from 2015 until 2022, you'll notice that foams are the number one. Every single year, without fail, it's the number one. And 2022 isn't fully complete, but it's the number one piece of microplastic that we find on every beach at the highest concentrations. By foams, I mean the little small, brown, beautiful, spherical foam balls, as well as bits and pieces of like Dunkin' Donuts cups and dock foam as well. So, that it doesn't matter how many different types of stats we do, we still keep getting foams as the number one by significant amounts. And then when we look at it per beach, same thing. Every single beach, the highest and number one piece of microplastic that we find are foams. So, so that tells us something. It's like, okay, well, what do we do with that information? And we're still trying to work on it. Like, what is the actual recommendation in the end? The other thing that we have found is that microplastics do not vary significantly seasonally. So we sample from April until October every year. We don't do winter sampling just because, we live in New England. It's kind of hard to get to the beach and actually have sand and not snow and ice. So maybe as temperatures rise, it won't be quite as problematic. And so they don't vary significantly seasonally, but it seems to have, there seems to be an overall lower trend in the summer. And that seems a little bit baffling because you would think in the summer you would have a lot more use of all of our beaches. And the reason that we think this trend is on the lower side in the summer is because all of these beaches at some point get raked. So Hampton Beach during the height of the summer gets raked every day. So does Genesee Beach. Wallace Sands maybe once or twice, once every week or every other week. And so we're working to try and collate that data to see if that really matches up with what we're seeing. And then, so remember I said every beach has 5 sites. We have a northern site and a southern site and 3 in the middle. And it looks like for whatever reason, and we think it's sort of the shape of the beaches and also how the water currents are flowing. The northern quadrants have significantly higher microplastics than the center ones and the southern sites. So, however the waves are hitting our beaches, it seems to be depositing more higher concentrations of overall microplastics. Even though there wasn't a significant difference among all 5 beaches, between Genesee Beach and Seabrook Beach, Genesee was significantly higher in microplastic concentrations than Seabrook Beach. Have you been to Seabrook Beach? Can anybody tell me why Seabrook Beach has so much fewer? Because you can't get to it. Yeah. You can't park. So, that plays a significant role. If the people can't get on the beach, it's not going to be as heavily impacted. So, essentially, our most consistent findings every single year, like I said, is that the number one type of microplastics are foams, regardless of beach, season, or year, and it accounts for 55% of all the microplastics that we have sampled across all the years. And like I said, Venice Beach has more microplastics than Seabrook. And interestingly and unexpectedly, it looks like our total microplastic counts seem to be on decline over our sampling period. We're not sure if this is a sampling artifact or real. Part of it, we think, is thanks to COVID. When everything was shut down, we weren't even allowed to be on the beaches, so we don't have quite as many samples from 2020. And I think we collected in the fall. We were finally able to collect 3 months of samples from there, and then in 2021, while things were still opening back up, I think it was more, you can see we start going back up. So it'll be interesting to see what last year and this year looks like. So, we're not saying that, oh yes, we're getting neater and cleaner and we're not using this stuff. We don't know yet, but, maybe we are. Essentially, like I said, foams are the number one. That's the purple bar. And then if you look at it per year and then by season, it's still the number one. Doesn't matter, like I said, how many different permutations and stats we're doing. That is a significant thing, which we can now then take to regulatory agencies, Fish and DES, and say, okay, regardless, there's something going on with these foams. We need to figure out where they're coming from. People are we're really kind of confounded by these, perfectly round styrofoam balls. Where it doesn't. Some of them seem to come off dock floats, but a lot of them just look like they're, sort of virgin, unused foams. Like they're not flattened in any way. They're super light. They are everywhere. If you start looking, they are everywhere. So they're so light, they move, you breathe on them and they move all over the place. So, where's that coming from? And then also with the docks and other, big floats, maybe it's time to say, okay, yes, we realize that you need to have a float, but maybe don't use styrofoam, maybe use this alternative and start at least making recommendations, if not, a problem. But in any case, after 8 years, that's been a lot of work, but this is like, it's yelling. Styrofoam, 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 foams, foams, foams. So, to me, that is also a way to start, speaking to the takeout industry, to Dunkin', to all of these businesses that have not yet jumped on the, more sustainable takeaway containers, or for consumers who haven't jumped on the bandwagon of bringing your own containers when you eat out. That's a really good place to start, and we kind of have the data to back it up. Hopefully some of this other stuff we'll get a clearer picture on soon. So what's next for this project? So in the last year, Blue Ocean Society and New Hampshire Sea Grant have partnered up with a statistician. So we finally had somebody who could look at this giant data set and kind of, make, just look at, organized it, analyzed it, and gave us something to work with. And so it's, we feel pretty confident that this is statistically robust and we can move on with it. It has also, I've been working with her to look at ways to look at our data set in conjunction with other data that we've been collecting, not we, but the state collects anyway. So things like, how often is the trash picked up? How many people, what's the foot traffic? What is around, what sort of development projects are in the area? Where are these nurdles coming from? that kind of thing. And that data is collected. Maybe it's not totally complete, but even not for every beach, but even if we got 3 of the main beaches, if we got that information and sort of, worked with it along with ours, it might give us a better picture and interpretation of what we are looking at with these trends. And Blue Ocean Society, so all of those samples we have kept in little manila envelopes for the last 8 years, and we finally have gotten some funding from a foundation to actually get them analyzed. So one of the things that we did to ID them was basically just very rough, coarse identification, which is it was a film, it was a fragment, it was a nurdle, it was a whole piece of plastic, etc. And so from that, from all of those samples that we held on to, it's not going to be taken to a lab and it's going to be analyzed with their fancy FTIR scopes and things like that, and will at least tell us what the makeup of all of this is. Some of it is pretty easy to ID, like, yes, that came from a bottle cap, but others have no idea where that came from. And then, just like with everything else that I do as part of Sea Grant and Extension, is we need to reach more people. And what is the best way of doing that? It's certainly not, I think if people had, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I think once people look at the gravity of what's in their environment, and then even just like a very simple 1-week experiment at home. I did this when my kids went through so much milk, and I thought we were doing a great thing. We were getting the glass bottles, but it only had a cap. And I collected those caps in a box for about a month. And I'm not kidding. It was an Amazon box filled with just the bottle caps for the milk. And then, I had some students do that with how often they went through the Dunkies drive-through and collected all of their iced coffee plastic cups for a week. And they're like, and I said, calculate how much you spent and what are you going to do with like an entire sleeve of cups. And I think even those small things really really get people thinking, and hopefully it's a behavior change. And then hopefully people will start saying, okay, we can't keep doing this. And then I really believe in this program. The more we keep monitoring, I think it's, even though it's tedious and so on, the information and the data, as well as just sort of the byproduct of having people involved and well-versed in it, I think is super beneficial. So as long as we can keep it going, I hope it's another 50-year-long, monitoring program like the Lake Slade Monitoring Program. So I think that's all I have for you guys. But I'm open to any questions related to this, or I can talk plastics and not so much PFAS. I'm not a chemist, but
I'll go into that. Great, that's really, really interesting. Any questions?
Thank you. So it seems to me one of the big challenges is PR, getting it out. You were talking about your students kind of checking and seeing how many Dunkin' Donuts cups they collected.
you should all do it.
Like, how do we reach out to the greater audience to make a difference and have them come to that realization that even though we're throwing it in a bucket and putting it out to get recycled, that's still not the answer.
No. Yeah, and the thing is, you're right, it's a messaging issue, because at this point we all know. We've seen the poor whales that are washing up with bags in their stomachs. We've seen the seals with, who are entangled. We've seen the turtle with the straw up its nose. We've seen it, but that, I think it's sort of a psychology, right? Like, people they're either, well, I can't do anything about it. Look, there's, however many billion people on this earth. I'm just a drop in the bucket. Nothing's going to happen. So how do we change the narrative? And it's something we've been struggling with. How do we say it's behavior change. The onus is on us to make those changes, to, bring your own takeaway containers and, sort of make that like putting on your seatbelt. It's just sort of automatic. And then once that is automatic, then start hitting it where the corporations, where it hurts, which is their pocketbook. You don't buy those things over and over and over. And then you go to a restaurant, you're like, I really love it here, but I can't keep doing the styrofoam takeaway. Can you at least do something? And so on. I'm not a PR person, I could say it till I blue in the face, but I do think one of the things that has worked really well is going to the younger audiences. And just they get it. My kids get it everywhere they go. They start picking. It's just automatic. They pick stuff up. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, when everything turned into no, everything needs to be thrown away all the time, and plastic this and plastic that, the amount of new plastic, disposable plastic that we put into our environment is obscene. And so then we got used to it, right? We got used to that convenience. It's just sort of changing that mentality. Yeah. And I don't know how to, that's not what I'm trained in, So that's a social science thing. And honestly, in a lot of our RFPs for this kind of work, they're now asking, how are you going to affect, sort of behavioral change? If that's one of, your goals, how are you going to do that? And you have to sort of really think it through, and it's a stumper, And then at some point, when do people stop listening? Because it's the same thing over and over and over again. My teenager does it.
One of the things because it's not just necessarily the beachgoers that are creating, it's all of us, and our stuff is blowing here or there. So one of the things, we had Casella here once. We're going to hopefully have him back, because I think everybody thinks they can recycle plastic, and most of it you can't, even though it goes in your recycling bin. So I think getting the haulers to educate the customers that stuff isn't recyclable, and it blows out of their bin, but they take it anyway, so people think it's recycled, but it could end up anywhere.
Yeah, well, so that's what I call wishful recycling. And one of the things that I've been doing with my colleague, Patty Jarima, who's my statistician, she and I did just a survey of just UNH campus, and just to see how well do you know how to get rid of your, how to properly dispose of this stuff. And they had no idea. They're like, oh, I don't know, I just recycle. I'm like, well, do you see the list that says, this number and this number and this number? They're like, well, the signs aren't very, they don't really make that much sense. And then there's the confusion between what's a good compostable bioplastic. And as soon as you see that, they're like, oh, great, I'll keep using it, but I'll use the greenware. Well, what they don't know is that you need a giant industrial incinerator or, composting facility for it to even break down. You can't and then you can't actually recycle that plastic, right, in the regular recycling. So, I've done it. I've put it in my compost bin, and that thing does not decompose.
So when
it's
your
not hot enough.
analysis, is that something your analyst is going to do? Like, do you know if you're getting those biodegradable pieces of plastic that are just not biodegrading?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get an idea of, what we've been collecting. But you're absolutely right. One of the things that we say is that all water leads to the ocean. And so, it's not just the beach cleanup. That's the other thing that we're hoping to do is, well, okay, now let's start doing, riverbeds. And let's start doing other watershed level monitoring. We tried, we didn't get funded, so we're going to keep trying. But just even simple interventions like putting lids on your containers is huge. You can't overfill them because they'll still come out, but having those big, the big containers is important. And I think the other thing too is, again, we're lazy. And so as soon as you see single stream, great, here's my single stream can and then my garbage. And so, there's other cultures that actually sort everything, you know, this plastic, cans, you know, styrofoam, and then then it goes to the proper recycling stream. But that's not happening here. And it's also, you know, money. It's expensive.
I was gonna
So-
say, you know, we should be paying for that as a consumer.
See, that's where I think I disagree. I think the manufacturers of
Yeah.
these products should be paying.
But they'll
If it
pass
c-
it on, they'll pass it on. to the
Well,
customer.
either they'll
Yeah.
pass it on and you'll refuse to pay it, and then, you know,
You should have the
so
choice.
you know, but I think that's the other issue is we haven't held those manufacturers accountable. Like, why should I have to throw away all the extra packaging that you're putting on a cucumber or
Yeah.
a banana? Like that, it's crazy.
But you can some places like, you know, the flower pots we all get, or vegetable pots we all get now with
Right.
our plants. Those are not recyclable, even though I see lots of people putting them in their bin. But places will take them now, like Lowe's.
Yeah.
What they do with them, I don't know, but at least they're taking them back to a centralized place.
Yeah.
So we're not putting them in the bin where they're then gonna go
Yeah.
blow away or go off to some.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully they're recycling them, right? They're
so.
like, you bring them
Yeah.
back and we'll repop them and
Yeah.
go again. Like, that would be the easiest way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's sort of going back to the days of, you know, the milkman, and you put your empty one and he gives you a new one, and then you rewash everything, so, yeah, so, and just the sheer amount of what is being produced on an annual basis globally it's hard to wrap your head around, so.
Well, very interesting. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you,
and
very illustrative.
Good.
All
good
right, well,
for
thank you
everybody.
for having me.
Yeah, and we're on TV, so there were people out there watching apparently.
Oh, great.
People do watch, so, or they can watch later.
Yeah.
So.
And yeah, feel free to, you know, shoot us an email and, you know, Blue Ocean Society does all the scheduling for the microplastic sampling, so if anybody feels like joining, you know, that, just to see what it's like. And if anybody wants us to teach you and, you know, how to do it and sort of start that with other groups, more the merrier, right?
Just one more question. You talked when they scrape the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably they're scraping the beach and they're scraping whatever is there, the
Yeah.
microplastics. Where is it just getting spread around more when they do that?
No, I think they're actually taking it out and putting it in the landfill. Because it is I've seen it. Haven't looked at it super closely, but I think that they break it and they collect it as best as they can. You know, but at Hampton Beach, that's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out, at least with Hampton Beach, because they do it so often. They do it every day in the summer. Where does it go? What do you do with it? And, you know, do you ever tally it up? Do you do it by poundage? And so on. And it's not just the little tiny pieces, but it's, you know, all the things that could become tiny pieces. So, but yeah, in Honduras, where I'm from, I was visiting right when I was starting this stuff, and we went to the beach, and a cruise ship had accidentally, on purpose maybe, dumped all of their garbage and it flew up on the beach that we were staying at. And I watched, and their way of dealing with it was exactly that. They just basically took a digger and just dug a hole and shoved it in there. And, you know, they made it look nice. I'm like, yikes. So, I'm not sure what the other bigger beaches are doing in the U.S., but definitely know they get raked. So.
So is that what you're thinking, like, so Seabrook Beach would be more representative of what's in the Bottle Column, because there's less foot traffic and people there, and then the other beaches?
And actually, that's a really good question. So, interestingly, we've been seeing a lot more of the lobster trap plastic on that beach than the other ones. And because it's not 5 millimeter, it's not coming up as a signal, but in the macro version of this stuff, I have jars of the bits and pieces of plastic. And we started seeing more when the lobstermen started switching the manufacturers of their traps. and the plastic coating is a cheaper one, and so it comes off more readily. Because nobody is on Seabrook Beach, we see it more often there. So absolutely, yeah, and people aren't littering there, really.
That's what I mean, yeah, so
You
there's
know.
not- so there's less stuff that's deposited, breaking down,
Mhm.
and it's coming off.
Yeah, but you styrofoam, so that's flowing from somewhere. Air, so, but, anyway.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Thank
sure.
you.
I used to find, balloons
Mm.
that people would let off like car dealerships, birthday parties and stuff, from 75 miles in,
Mhm.
and we found those balloons on the beach and we told it not.
Yeah, no, so that is, one thing that we do still find, you know, we're not seeing it as much, but, yeah, people still want those balloons. My kids from very early on, it's like, no, we don't do that, and they would say, well, why not? And I was like, because that will kill a whale. And, you know, so for little kids, it's impressionable, but I think what people, especially the releases, you know, like, it's graduation, woo, they don't realize that what comes up must come back down, and it might not necessarily be where you let it off. But yeah, we still are collecting a lot of those balloons. And the Mylar balloons are a little bit easier, I think, to dispose of because they don't decompose quite as fast, but the latex balloons, like, they really just sort of disintegrate, and we find that a lot, and also the ribbon. That is a lot, that we see a lot more of, still. So, and that, again, is just, what do you need a balloon?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think we're gonna take up that issue of balloons, some point discussed, because people are still using balloons, and they
Mhm.
really are a hazard to wildlife.
well, they are, and also the paper lanterns.
Yeah.
You know, the ones with the
Yeah.
candle in there, and they're really pretty, and then they, you know, cause
Mhm.
a forest fire.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it really is just a lot of, you know, awareness and discussion, and at what, you know, how much mandating can there be, you know, and
Right, you don't wanna keep being a nag, but I
Right.
think it's, for me, it's the numbers, right, of us
Mhm.
humans, you know,
Well, and that's it.
200, 100 years ago, well, not balloons, but, you know, it was a small little bits here and there, but there's so many of us, it accumulates.
yeah, but
It's
I mean, and
accumulating in the environment.
I think it is up to us to start saying, nope, we're not doing that. You know, for me as a parent, it was really important, and I said so, and they would be sad, and I'm like, sorry, can't do that. And now they go up to car dealerships and they're like, no, that's not very good. So, I feel like it's up to us to, you know, pick those fights.
Mhm.
Go to the restaurants, go to birthday parties and say, I don't really want a balloon. You know, you don't have to say it to anybody else, but I'm like, I'm gonna pass. And, you know, eventually people will stop putting money into those, into those pockets. So, I'm telling you,
Great.
hit them where it hurts.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Great. Okay, moving along here. Next is, excuse my financial summary, so that's, I guess I'll give that. The conservation fund, overall total is $131,829.10. The only expenditure last month was, I guess we didn't have any expenditure specifically. Some of the stuff we bought will be on next month's, like the Wigan Farm kiosk, which we'll talk about in a sec. So, not much change in that account. And then for the general fund, $1,493.75. And just the part-time salary, for Sue, I think, on that. I do have a couple funding requests, but we'll talk about them under properties, I think. So, any questions on the financial report? Okay. So, next up, we have, Drew Kefauver is here. As I think I mentioned a month or so ago, the Southeast Land Trust is updating their Piscasset Greenway Management Plan, and as part of that, they have a management advisory committee made up of folks from the town of Newfields, rep from Newmarket, Fish and Game, and the staff, Johan Hanley, the trails person, the new trails person, and I've been facilitating the process. And we just wrapped up our final set of meetings. And so we're coming out. We just finished it this week, so Drew's just going to give a summary of what we talked about. We'll probably have a handout next month. But if you want to get started, Drew's on Conservation Commission. You want to say the land. And I'm going to come up and put the map up, but you can
Okay, sure.
jump in and start if you like.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, let me back up a little bit. So this is an update to the management plan for the Piscasset Greenway. So the Piscasset Greenway started out as 3 pieces of property, and Ellen's going to pop up a little map that'll show that. Over time, additional pieces of property have been added. Most of the original properties, or all of the original properties, were primarily, there you go, were primarily in new fields. And the more recent properties have been primarily in Newmarket. And so that's why when the Southeast Land Trust was looking to update this management plan, they asked for a representative from Newmarket to be involved as well. Yeah, so this map shows the Piscasset Greenway. The 3 original parcels were sort of the very light yellow, the sort of light purple, and then the slightly darker yellow that are off on the left-hand side. And then the additional properties are the ones kind of on the northern side on the Newmarket piece there, sort of in pink, blue, and yellow, darker yellow. When this property was conserved, the Southeast Land Trust hired a forester. His name is Charlie Marino, to develop the original management plan for the property. He is being hired to perform this update, and the update is mandated, I think, is it on a 10-year cycle? It's essentially on a 10-year cycle. And again, the idea is to sort of look at the property, what management has been done, what hasn't been done, what changes have occurred, et cetera, and try to move forward from there. So some of the biggest things related to the management plan update, again, are including all of the properties that are now part of it. I guess one other thing I should mention is the different colors indicate the different properties. The different properties were also acquired with different funding partners, which also means the different funding partners have their own different interests and restrictions or constraints, if you will. So one of the things that we had to review was a spreadsheet where, okay, the Cole Farm was conserved with funding from these partners, and therefore has these set of restrictions. The Cole Wildlife has these restrictions, and so there's a whole combination of them there that is it's interesting. I'll say it that way. It creates new constraints, I think, is the way to say it. Again, the goal is really to manage the forest for its primary purposes: wildlife habitat, biodiversity, forest health, water quality, and recreation. There has been and will be ongoing forestry on the property. It's mainly focused on those goals. It's not focused on generating income from the forest products that are taken. If there actually is income, that's great. It's usually just reinvested back into the property rather than being a real true income source. Let's see what else. Another thing that's being recommended, there is a fair amount of invasive species that are going to negatively impact tree species on the property. So for example, emerald ash borer, there are some ash trees on the property. The emerald ash borer is essentially just wiping out the ash trees in our area, at least the larger ash trees. And so, that was not a concern or an issue 10 years ago, but in this management plan it is, and it's something we need to be thinking about. Similarly, the hemlock woolly algid is on a lot of the trees out in that area, particularly on, very noticeable on some of the trail areas. And so those areas of the forest are going to be changed. And so from a management perspective, we might as well acknowledge that and if at all possible, incorporate that into the management plan, or to the extent reasonably possible. We know it's going to happen, so we might as well try to take care of it, well, address it in a way that is addressable. Oh, and I should have said, if anyone has questions, feel free to raise a hand, and I'll gladly try to address those.
Have they discussed anything to do about hemlock algid specifically yet?
Nothing too specific. I mean, realistically, if the trees are, I'll say infected, I'm not sure that's quite the right term, they're going to die. And so, in some regards, it becomes a question of, from an ecological perspective, is it better to have that tree die standing and fall in the forest, or does it make sense to try to cut it, clear it out, create an opening in the forest that can now become a regeneration zone? And so, that's the sort of stuff that,
That's what I was curious.
yeah, those are the sort of things that will probably be incorporated, at least to some extent, within the management plan.
One of the things that the committee is doing is to raise those questions, because, and then Charlie we want him to, or the committee wants him to describe, well, what will you do in terms of management if the hemlock are all dying and the ash are dying? And he's obviously dealing with this on lots of properties in southern New Hampshire, so the forest will change. And as Drew said, it's a matter of, markets, or whether you leave them or take them, or whether you can get some money, or where they are on the property. So, yeah, but definitely we'll address it.
And that's, those two are on the tree level. There's also invasives in some of the fields, in the coal fields. How do I pop up your pointer? Oh, here it is. Yeah, this yellow property over here on the western side. There's some invasive plants in the fields over here, and so again, we're trying to make sure that management activities related to mowing of the fields doesn't help spread those invasives any more than they're already spreading. There's also some areas that are early successional areas, that have been cut under this current management plan and have been, recut so that there's smaller trees, et cetera, in those areas. There's invasives in some of those areas as well, so there's concern of, if something is done to cut those areas down, will the invasives just explode back? So I think in general, invasive species are something that were less considered in the original management plan, and is something that we're realizing really does need to be addressed, or at least thought of in an ongoing sense. Let's see, what else? There are in the coal fields areas over here, there are 2 agricultural leases. One is for the community garden that's over here in this corner near the parking lot off of Bald Hill Road, and the other is for the farm that exists in this little exclusion area here. They have sheep, and they have a lease to use some of the field area out here for their sheep. So those are incorporated in the existing plan and will continue to be incorporated in future plans. Management access to the property, so for forestry management and or for field management. So the current access points are Neal Mill Road, Halls Mill Road, and there's an access point through private property that comes off of Route 87 and comes through, crosses the rail trail, and then pops in. And really those access points are for the various portions of the property. So for example, the Neal Mill Road is good for anything that is east of the main wetland that runs, essentially this property is divided by a wetland that runs through the middle of it. And so everything east of that main wetland can more or less be accessed from Neal Mill Road. Everything west of that wetland area is accessed more from the 87 management access easement. Because even in the winter, if you tried to cross that wetland, you would make a mess. Suboptimal, to put it politely. There are, and or will be, I guess I would say, recommendations related to public uses and trails and trailheads and parking. I think in general, we don't expect the recommendations to have any significant changes to what's currently there, I think is sort of the way of saying it. There's a reasonably extensive trail network that's in there. Different user groups are permitted on different trails, and that's likely to stay that way, in large part due to restrictions from either funding sources or from just practical applications, so to speak.
How many miles of trails are there?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I know the biggest loop is 3 miles.
Is it really that big? I'm surprised it's that
Yeah.
big.
Like to start at Neal Mill and go up over Otis Hill and include the morales and back.
Oh,
It's about,
That's a little more.
it's
That
like about
would be
3.2.
Yeah.
yeah. And one other area of discussion, and this I think will come to the Conservation Commission specifically. Right now, this burn trail goes up, and there's a gate here at the edge of the property, the Scasset Greenway property. There is a trail that goes on from here, kind of drops down into some wetland, and then it works its way back up towards Win Hilton's property, which is conserved with a conservation easement through the town. The trail that's there is definitely used in the winter for snowmobile trail and access, but it is wet in some of the lowland areas, so it's very difficult to use outside of frozen times, so to speak. But it would be nice to, in an ideal world, it would be nice to have that trail be able to connect as it does in the winter and find its way over to Wigan Farm, because then you could connect over to the trails in Wigan Farm. The snowmobile trail makes its way over there. So I think that'll need to be a discussion between the town / conservation commission and abutting property owners on whether or not it makes sense to have those trails continue to exist, or be expanded to expand the trail network, so to speak. And I guess one other noteworthy chunk, when this piece, which is referred to as Tucker 2, was purchased, this one was purchased with wetland reserve easement, which severely limits what can be done. It's a relatively small piece of property. I think it's 15 acres. It's very limited on what can be done on that property because of that funding source. But the sort of interesting and strange part is it also had this little 1 acre sliver over here that is along Old Lee Road, and it's essentially just after the bridge for the Piscassic River. And it was sort of, it's, I don't know, it's sort of a weird artifact that it was on the deed with this other property. But because it is this weird little 1 acre piece, there really isn't anything you can do with it. It just sort of is floating out there in space.
Let it go wild.
It probably was supposed to be included in some transaction, somewhere along the way, and there was an oversight or whatever.
And that one's not WRP, right? That's just
That's correct.
Silk property?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the goal is, we're gonna wrap up our the committee's gonna wrap up our recommendations, within the next month, and then I'll come back and have a handout to be able to provide you folks. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
One question.
Yeah, shoot.
Was there any talk with the towns or by the towns about minor improvements to the section there of, I guess we call it Hall's Mill at that point, where it's quite nice?
Yes, there's actually, so, yeah, I think where Jeff is talking about is, so this is the field area, for those of you who are more familiar with it. This is Neal Mill Road. I don't know where it converts from Neal Mill to Hall's
Right
Mill.
there.
Town line.
Right there,
But
the
let's say
town
it's
line.
at the town
Yeah.
line, which is right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's an area here where it's pretty wet. As a matter of fact, the answer to that question is yes. That's being looked into. And I should have mentioned this too. So one of the areas being looked at for in here is to improve accessibility for ADA compliance as well. And so that area in particular is a problematic area. And so, yes, there's discussion of, can that Class A trail be improved, or what can be done to improve that Class A trail so that it's not a mud pit? Because it's drying out now, but for the last month and a half, it's been very muddy.
Yeah, fall,
Like
winter,
we
and
say.
spring.
Yeah.
It's a little rough.
Yeah, and there's discussions in that area, kind of down in this area, heading down towards the bridge that goes over the Beaver Dam. That area gets wet and could use some drainage.
That's a
There's-
solid base.
Yeah.
People don't realize when
Yeah.
they go around it, and it's actually wetter to go around
Oh,
that.
Yeah,
Good
The
point.
center of it's like
solid.
firm, and only
Yeah,
Just a little bit of water.
yeah. It needs a little drainage help, and I think things would help there. Kind of the same on Old Lee Road here. There's sort of drainage that starts out on this side, and then it flows into the road, and basically just flows down the road towards the Piscataqua River there, and generates some washouts. So again, it would be nice to do a little bit of work there, and improve the drainage, and then the surface will kind of self-improve on its own after that. But
Looks like that bridge there had been knocked up, not level anymore.
it hasn't been level in decades.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought
It-
it looked flatter the first time I'd been out there.
Well, there was a lot of rain the other day, so.
Yeah.
One thing to note, which I think you know, is that, Hall's Mill and Neal Mill are Class A trails. So those are so SELT would just be a partner with the town. It's really our responsibility if we want to do things there. And then, if you remember, the council reclassified Neal Mill Road as a Class A trail, but they did not do Old Lee Road, although it is a Class A trail in Newfields. And so I think we should take that back up if we think we want to recommend that to the council, because you're not supposed to put town money into a Class 6 road, but we can if it's a Class A trail. So if we want to do anything to Old Lee Road, it would behoove us to make it a Class A trail. And it's
Really?
bracketed by 2, so,
I really think they should, and I can't believe they didn't the first time while they were in the process.
we could
it
actually
seemed
make that motion tonight if we want to just resubmit I can sort of rewrite that letter that I wrote, if people think that's a good idea. We'll do that motion after we wrap up.
Yeah, so did I answer your question, Jeff?
Yes,
Related to
definitely,
trails?
that's what I
So-
was curious how the town, I figured the town of Newfields would have to do something, or so it would work with the town of Newfields.
Yeah,
So I should say that, right, the two representatives from the town of Newfields on the management plan update committee are both on the Conservation Commission, and they've actually gone out and gotten at least one bid on, hey, if you were to come in here and remove some of the soft soils, replace it with, more ground stone sort of stuff in this area, what would it cost, blah, blah, blah. So they're definitely looking at that, so that's. And
yeah, it's great.
Johan has mentioned other smaller but related trail improvement possibilities out there as well. Yeah. Anyone else have any other questions? Thank you
Thanks,
for your
Drew.
time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Grab that back.
I'll bring it over.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see you back in June after the,
Yeah.
great. Have a good hike. Okay, so we could make a motion tonight, then we could get a letter off to the council. We don't have a council rep yet, but it's okay, we can send it along to reclassify Old Lee Road as a Class A trail in Newmarket. Would someone like to make that motion?
Am I allowed to make that?
Sure, you're an actual member, real member. Yes, you can.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the town council that they reclassify the section of Old Lee Road in Newmarket to a Class A trail.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Julie. Any discussion? Everybody can vote, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. All right, I'll get that letter drafted. Great. Great, that's a great outcome. Okay, let's move along here. We got still much more to talk about. So you remember last time I sent around the operating guidelines as a suggestion that we adopt because there was a very old version of bylaws. And in talking to NHACC, they said, operating guidelines are fine and perhaps better, because the idea is that it's really for members and for the next chair, so you kind of know what the heck you're supposed to do or what we're doing. So I don't know if anybody had time to read them, or whether you want more discussion or another month to review them, or you'd like to adopt them tonight. What would be your pleasure? There's no huge hurry, so if you need another month, we can wait another month. But it's really just the basics of kind of what we're doing, but I don't want you to adopt them if you don't feel like you had a chance to absorb them.
I have not had a chance to go
Okay.
through it, so.
Should we delay another month and take some time? Okay. I will delay another month if you could take a look at them when you're bored sometime. And that way we can, it would be nice to have them in hand, so we're good to go. Okay, so let's move on to committee reports, planning board, and Jeff.
We met this Tuesday. There was really not much pertinent to the Concom. Bart did discuss and read the pathways
Oh, okay.
document.
Mhm. Okay.
And basically we spent a lot of time on the historic district.
Mhm.
So.
Any comments from the rest of the planning board on the pathways?
I think they thought it was a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, people supported it
Great.
definitely, but that was about
Mhm.
I
And-
also kind of brought a little. It was a very long meeting, and so we didn't spend a lot of time on committee reports. But I did mention our last month's presenter and how the planning board could potentially have a positive impact on access to conserved properties
Mhm.
through planning,
Mhm.
future sidewalks, parking, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Very good. Yeah.
Maybe that'll spur people to think about it next time
Mhm.
something comes up.
Mhm. And you were reappointed. Thank you.
Oh, yes, I was.
We're very happy. At
My
least I am.
hesitancy was not aimed at the board.
Appreciate you being back with us. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I know.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, Riverfront Advisory Committee, Shanda Park stuff.
Sam?
I think my update is gonna be fairly light. We met on Monday. So a lot of this month's discussion was mostly just on conceptual ideas of, how we could potentially expand the Riverwalk. Primarily mostly to the south right now, kinda down, past Creighton Street and out behind, the wastewater plant towards Young Lane. So nothing concrete right now. There's some potential easement issues and other things that we're kinda looking at and all that, but that was this month's discussion. I do think it's gonna be a little bit of a slow summer for us. We were talking with, Bart, the town planner, and Lindsay, the town engineer, on Monday. And I think some of the things we discussed, especially the design charrette, where there was gonna be sort of a town-wide meeting to potentially discuss high-level concepts about riverfront and community engagement. That sounds like instead of being this fall, it's probably gonna be next spring. So a couple things are sliding back. So still don't have a full picture of what we're getting into, but it might be a little bit of a slow summer. One thing I mentioned in here once, and we've talked about a couple times at Riverfront, though, has been trying to see if there can be like a park maintenance plan that gets developed for Shanda Park. So no real discussions have been had with anyone right now. It's kind of, again, high level concept only, but additional discussion, basically of making sure that the Conservation Commission is aligned with, the rec department or the parks department, anybody like that, public works, anyone who has a stake in it. There's just some minor maintenance stuff that needs to get done. There's some bricks missing by the town floating dock that's kind of a trip hazard. There's some tree and shrub growth, and things like that. So just minor things, a little coordination to potentially be had, just to make sure that it's clear who's responsible to do what and that it actually gets done. So that might be a discussion that we kind of pursue a little bit, and see if we can get some of the players in town to discuss.
Yeah, so Sam had mentioned this to me, and I suggested that I'm happy to, or you and I can meet with Rick and Amy to kind of go over that. And we do have a Richard Shanda fund, and we've never, I don't think, used any of that money that was donated. So if there's some maintenance issues out there, we should, when we meet out there, figure out what those costs would be, and we can request that at next meeting specifically from that fund. I think that's exactly what it is.
I think it was too, and
Yeah.
I don't know if we've ever spent a
Yeah.
dollar out of it since
Yeah.
I've been on the commission.
Yeah.
So.
Would it be better that we should probably go out and scope it out, see what's needed, then come back next month?
Probably worthwhile.
Okay.
See if we can
Anything
do that.
hazardous though that you think we should do, we could just say if we need, and Rick could do something for $100 or $200. I mean, just, if there's some hazard there that we want fixed, then they could do it for some.
I don't think there's anything that's gonna cause serious harm to
Okay.
anyone in the interim, but it's just that,
Take a look.
yeah, for how much it gets used and how much people like it, it could use a little TLC.
All right, we'll figure out a time to do that. Any other questions for, oh, I got one more thing for Shannon. Anything else for that?
I'm all set, thank you.
So I think I sent around, we got a request for, a permit request for Shanda Park, which is the one property where people actually have to apply for a permit from us. This is from Elizabeth Loeb, not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but Celebration of Life for Thomas Sewell. She lives in Maine. He has some connection, I think, to the area. So the request is on June 3rd or June 10th or June 17th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. His last wishes included a celebration of his life at Shanda Park with food, story sharing, and music to be open to the public. There will be no alcohol permitted. What do we think of the request? Some of you have more history of permit requests for Shanda than I do, so. I mean,
It sounds fine to
sounds
me.
fine, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need
Yep.
to pick one date or just say whatever three?
Yeah, I don't think we have any conflicts of those days. Those are, I think those are weekdays, 6 through, let me just check real quick.
That's Saturday.
Are they Saturdays?
Yeah.
No, dates, okay. Let's just check real quick. The concerts are all during the week, right, in the evenings, so there's no conflict, and we've had no other requests, so, I'm okay with that. Anybody? It says they know they have to carry in, carry out, and, it's open to the public, so seems good. So motion to approve this permit, for Elizabeth Loeb, Fish in the Park.
I move we approve.
Thank you, Tom. Second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Either or.
David's, all right, David's got the second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, I'll let her know. She can pick a date and let us know what the date is, and we'll be good to go. Okay, good. Town council, as I said, I don't think, they've appointed people to committees yet. Maybe next week? I'm not sure.
We learned on Tuesday that they did fill the town council,
Okay.
so.
Okay, so
Yes,
now
they
they
have a full
can, now
council,
they
so
can
now
vote on the committee
presumably
reps.
they'll
Okay,
put some-
very good. Okay, and Energy and Environment Committee, apparently we have to reappoint every year. So I've asked Juliana if she would like to get reappointed, since she does. So before she gives her report, maybe we can approve reappointing her to serve on that committee.
Do we need a motion?
We need a motion, I think.
A motion to renew her position.
Thank you, Tom. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Colin. All in discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. All right, now you can give a report.
I had a work thing last meeting, so I unfortunately wasn't there. But it does look like next week the town council will be voting to kind of give us the power to look into community power and become that body of who, deciding where we want to get our community power from. So, yeah, at the next town council meeting, they'll be voting on that. It also is just interesting in this email from Joe, that, that's okay. Community Power has officially been, starting to have enrollment as of the end of April. 63,000 plus people, have been enrolled, and then another 10,000 to go. And that's including the towns of Exeter, Durham, Dover, Portsmouth, and Stratham, and Newfields is also looking into it as well. So exciting stuff on that front, and hopefully I'll have more to report next time, because I'll get to the next meeting.
Great, moving along. Excellent. Any questions for Julie? Thanks for stepping up again, that's great. Newmarket 300 Steering Committee, Melissa's not here, so we'll move along on that. She's also working on the initiative. She's working on the pollinator pathways. She has the kits. She's thinking about, and we've reached out to the junior, senior high school of, there was 5 kits, and we were thinking about all over town, but she's thinking now of junior, senior high school and the rec center, which are adjoining, and then get the school involved. And we've reached out to some of the teachers, and they're starting to respond. So hopefully, they just want to learn a little bit more about it and what it is, and so she'll follow up with them. And I think the idea would be you prep the site during the summer, you get it ready, and you plant in the fall. So we're really just it's in the prep stage anyway. So that seemed like a good solution to that kind of project, I thought. Okay, Pathways for People in Nature. I did want to have you relook at that and see. We haven't really sort of formally adopted the concept, and it's really sort of encompassing lots of things we're working on, but I did want to kind of have the commission sort of endorse it if you were willing to do that. So we have that. And we'll obviously tweak it. I did send out we got some comments back from the technical assistance people, and it was just like how to group the things. I thought their wording was nice. It was just adding some titles and stuff. So happy to have discussion or a motion if you endorse the idea, whatever your pleasure is. Comments?
It's pretty complete. It's had a lot of input. A lot of people have looked at it.
Quick question. I printed out both of these, then I got them mixed up, so it looks like one was kind of a improvement over the other one.
Yeah, one, under all the bullets below, there's actually, it's sort of grouped into, sort of topic areas.
Okay,
Does that look like under your, you might have this,
So I think the one on the right is the newer one.
that's the good one?
yeah.
Okay.
And once, so the
Right on
draft,
this side.
the draft is really for us, so once we endorse it, then we'll take the draft off, and then we'll know which one we have. We'll have a final,
Yeah.
final one. So,
I mean, I would make the motion that the Conservation Commission adopt the Pathways for People in Nature initiative and make public or
yeah, I think
or
that's,
publicize or
yeah, I think we want to start sharing, one, just to.
share the document.
Yeah, sounds good. That's a motion, so I'll.
On the town website or however you see fit.
Up to adopt and share.
Sounds great. Thank you. Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Sam. Any more discussion? I'll just say, one of the things we're working on, the technical assistance people, we have this time of a GIS, Pete Steckler, who's a conservation GIS, really good. He's actually the one that made the maps for Connect to Protect, which is their initiative. So he's working on some maps. These are big maps, and what they're going to show is existing conserved lands in Newmarket, and actually beyond, forget how far we went, half a mile. And then the focus areas that they identified, so the remaining, like, really important ecological, their thing was ecological, so there's a lot of green, and then there's a lot of purple. So the purple is like the stuff that's still really important. So it's going to be a simpler map than the one they produced, because that was really busy, but it's going to be this big map, and we can, gather around it and look at it and study it. And also make one for like a PowerPoint, so we can share it with people here or elsewhere. And then we're collecting, we're checking the conservation lands to make sure that's accurate, and we're also collecting all the trails data, because that's not really collected GPS-wise everywhere. And then he's going to overlay the trails. So we're going to have the conserved lands, we're going to have the remaining core ecological areas, and then we're going to overlay the existing trails. And that's where we want to see where all the future potential connections are. And we want to share that because obviously some of those lines and places cross private land. Matter of fact, almost all this, because it's not conserved. So we want to share that with people, and if there are interested people that want to be interested in talking to us about that connectivity idea, then we'd be happy to share. So we want to make it very public. It's just information that's available, and we're just trying to put it in a way on a map that's easily digestible. So with that, we need to vote. So all in favor of adopting the initiative, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Thank you.
Bart had mentioned that you're going to meet with the town of Durham.
Yes.
And is that tie into this at
Yeah,
all?
well, it
as
was a
far as
I think
pathways?
Bart might have shared with them because he's in communication with other towns, and they asked us to come because they were interested in what we were doing.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about, because we are looking at trail connectivity between towns, and so
Right.
they're kind of interested, like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That he kind of brought it. He talked about a bunch of stuff in
Yeah.
his report, and he kind of was close in time to this.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
So it
so-
seemed like it might be part of the discussion as a connected trail.
Yeah, it sounds like we're all kind of converging on that, because apparently Brentwood, not all connected, abutting us, but Brentwood, Stratham, I think Dover, all these towns are looking at trail connectivity too, so they're looking for where are all the trails data, so, and we want to look at it by uses, so hopefully there'll be a spreadsheet of, or the trails will be coded by uses, so obviously pedestrian is everywhere, and then bicycling, because some trails you can and can't, horseback, some trails you can and can't, snowmobiling, some you can and can't, so, because the coding is kind of important, because people want to do different things on different trails, so we'll hopefully, if we can get all that, it may take a few iterations in time, but that's the goal, to have that, and then, yeah, so. We'll keep going. Awesome. Stream and wildlife crossings. I have one piece, but, oh, he left. He stepped out. Let's wait till he comes back on that, so we'll come back to that. Probably need it for the next one too. Let's jump down to land stewardship. We'll come back to those two pieces. So Sliding Rock, we're still working on, I'm still working on the kiosk text. For some reason, I've been very slow on that one. The rec department has ordered the kayak rack, so there'll be a second kayak rack there, and you'll be able to rent kayaks, or you can rent a slip for your own boat, because we have an issue out there with people just having their boats everywhere. So we're working on signage, and that will be through the rec department, which is great.
I've heard they started renting slips already.
Have they started?
That's
Yeah.
my understanding.
Yeah, I think there's a list, so if people want, we might have to get another one so people can rent.
You have to get on the scene. I know one person who has already got a slip.
What's that? I think each rack can hold 6 or 8. I'm trying to remember. 6 and 6. I don't know how many she's reserving for slips. Yeah, she might have to say 6 slips and 6 rentals. I'm not sure how she's going to do that. Part of it is just to see what the demand is, and then maybe we'll need a third one. I don't know. Yeah, and then Tom and I are going to go out there because we want to put up some. Once we get the boat things settled, where the rack is, and where to get these other boats out of there, we're going to fence off an area that needs to be fenced off for erosion control. Okay, we're going to go back up because I came on streams
Okay.
and wildlife crossings. So I have one thing, but do you have anything you want to share on that?
On the crossings?
Stream and wildlife crossings.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I'll pass these around real quick. This is, I looked at, our data set is pretty full for the town of Newmarket. This is an example of a report that we did for the Ammonoosuc watershed. And I was thinking along those lines of putting together this sort of quick report that a summary of the condition of the infrastructure within the town.
Oh, yeah.
It could be used if, we find something that makes sense to go after funding, to do some replacements, initial draft of something. So, probably it would take me the next couple weeks to pull it together and make it happen. So I think we all know the Lamprey is a designated river, so that kind of boosts it as well, as far as priority goes for the seacoast drainage. So I think we have some opportunities there. We just have to figure out what potential funding source, if we choose to go down that path, would be available to get some money, and then who would spearhead the operation. So, I would say by our next meeting, I should have a draft of something that we could potentially look at and then put out there for people to decide on. The other piece I'm working on is the trail, the Boulder Development Trail. And I have a meeting tomorrow morning with the chair of the Boulder Association, and with Bart too. Fortunately, Bart was able to make it. Melissa is off on an exciting trip, as you know. So we should take a look at that tomorrow. My initial conversation on the phone with him, he's really receptive to us going in and improving the trail, taking out some of the old fencing there. He also brought up the idea, and I don't know if everybody has been out on that trail, but at the Lamprey Street entrance, there's an old dam there that was put together for an ice skating pond. And he was talking about, well, that would be kind of cool to rebuild that dam. I'm not sure we want to go down that route to even think about that, but it was interesting that he brought it up as a potential of the Boulder Association giving us permission to do that, potentially, depending on what it would cost to redo the dam.
I'm not following the dam on, it's on a brook?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, if you haven't been out there, you should just take a, or if you're available tomorrow at 9 o'clock, join us. But there's a woman whose family has been on that street for forever, and her father supposedly had that built, so there was an ice skating rink in the winter for the kids. And it's kind of defunct now a little bit. The stones have moved from high water. So it's still running, and it you know, the town improved the drainage, a while back. But, interesting idea as something that we could think about if it made sense. But I'll have more detail.
Remember when we walked that site when they were building, before they built the subdivision?
Yep,
And that was a, point of discussion, it was it was basically just a mud flat.
right,
Is what it was, and maybe a little bit of water.
yeah,
I think it was probably just a very big mosquito breeding spot.
yeah,
In its current condition.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if they really, you'd have to bring the elevation up if you wanted to fill it and get a skating thing out of it. I don't know, I think would end up being a lot of work.
Yeah, they had mentioned it as an old ice pond too.
What was that?
They had mentioned that it was an old ice pond.
Yeah.
They didn't say skating, but.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, maybe people carving ice out for the winter, but
Yeah.
when I dug a little further, the people I've talked to, they don't have, a memory of that,
Yeah.
so. But, I'll keep you posted next
Great.
month on how that goes, and by that time, Bart, and Melissa will be back and part of the conversation, and we'll kind of have a strategy to move forward on that.
Great, thank you. The only other piece I had, we got a request from a UNH graduate student, Lauren White. She is working on turtles and wants to put out some camera traps on the Ash Swamp Road crossing where all the turtles, by Jeff's house, where all the turtles cross and some get run over. So was just requesting information who she should talk to if it's okay to put cameras. So I referred her to Jeff because he lives right there, and to Lindsay Butler, the town engineer, since it's in the road right away. And if there's other abutting landowners she needs permission from. But yeah, I don't know if you want to. It's very exciting. It's great. It's exactly what we need for submissional data
Yeah.
to see what's going on there.
Josh McGeezy had.
Yeah, Josh from Fishing Game had referred her to us. So
Yeah, I'll reach
Nice.
back out to her.
Yeah,
just
I
got
figured you
emails
could
from today. Yeah, I'll
take a
definitely
lead
send it
on that.
tomorrow.
It's great, good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Oh,
Really
yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see where she wants to put the cameras. My property gets close to the culvert, but not
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured you could
Yeah, I
help
know
her figure out
that's
who
the process.
owns what. And, yeah, I mean, even at the roads, if people are speeding, you can get the speeders. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she'll see, a lot of blurs.
Did they put the
Cars
turtle
going by
crossing
super
signs?
quick.
Did they put the
Yeah,
turtle crossing
that
signs?
was one
up?
thing I was gonna bring up, is that last month I forgot to thank the DPW for putting the turtle signs up.
Yeah, 'cause it.
So they were up prior to our last meeting,
Yeah.
like shortly before our last
Mhm.
meeting, they went up.
So they put them up, the turtle crossings, and then they take them down again. I don't know when they take them down, but there's some on Grant Road,
Yep.
Ash Swamp.
Bay Road,
Bay Road. Okay.
by,
That's great.
by, what's the name of that place, Barbary Coast. in
Oh,
that-
yeah.
That vicinity,
Yep.
that neighborhood.
That's great. It's so nice. They're so, it's great. And I hope
Yeah.
ownership. Make a note.
They just put them off the side of the road there, stick them into the ground.
Yeah.
There's they install the metal signposts, and they just take them off the signposts in the fall.
If you look at them, they actually fold in half. I've never
So-
seen signs
Some
like
of
that.
them,
Oh,
some of them do, they
interesting.
were gonna, so
Yeah.
they don't leave them though, they take them all the way down. I can't remember why, instead of fold, there's a couple that fold, we only got some that fold and some that don't, fishing game.
them when they have cool animals
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly, and then they installed the third one on Ash Swamp up toward the end of the golf course.
Mm.
But, yes, cause some came from Fishing Game, and some we bought, so
Yeah,
that's why there's
that's
different
great.
styles.
Awesome. All right, great. All right, so then, all right, so let's jump back. So we have various events going on, and the Newmarket Fishing Derby, they raised all the money they need this year, which is great. So they don't need any money from the Conservation Commission, but because it involves the town police and the fire and, you know, whatever other emergency services they just have on hand, I guess, because of the number of people, they do need a town sponsor. And apparently they've asked us if we would, this year would be the sponsor, just to have somebody from the town as the sponsor. And then I told the folks that, you know, we'd like to have more of a conversation this summer about the whole event, and should it be a town event, and, you know, where does it fall in the umbrella in the community? So if we could, just make a motion to be the sponsor, it's really the town sponsor for the fishing derby, that would be great, and they'd be all set for this year.
Well, it's good the finances worked out.
Yeah,
like that.
that's great, yep.
So does the sponsor mean that in then the future, they may come back and look for some financial support?
I think we're gonna have that conversation this summer with the rec department, and, because if you look at a lot of the fishing derbies, in the state are sponsored by recreation departments
Right.
or the town itself, and so I think we'd like to have that conversation, because I've talked to them about our budget and priorities, even though it looks like we have a lot of money in the conservation fund, we do have a lot of projects in the pipeline, so, if they can raise the money, that's great.
Yep.
You know,
So why would the rec center not be the sponsor? This
I'm not
year?
sure, I'm not quite sure of the dynamics, but, it's in a month, so I figured it's, you know, we've done it before, so we could be the sponsor, so if people are okay with that.
Yeah.
And we could do a motion, that would be great.
I'll make a motion that we be the sponsor.
Okay, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, okay, thank you. And there's just some other events, Rec Connect, this is the rec department has a thing they put together with the Newmarket Business Association. I don't know if people get invited to that. Did people get invited to that? I'm not quite sure of that either, but, and then there's the Backyard Bash on August 4th. Because of all those things, I was talking to Chris, who's not here tonight, about, she wondered if we have any materials to give out, and, you know, sometimes giving out materials is not always useful, but, a few years ago I did a bookmark for the town of Durham for kind of an event, and so we thought that might be kind of interesting to think about a bookmark in collaboration with the library. So they would do something on one side and we would do something on the other side. So I just marked up, it's not even like somebody would need to take it, but essentially it would be, you know, what does it say? Get outside on Newmarket trails. So it would be about trails in Newmarket. And then there would be the Conservation Commission logo, and then either the web page where you can go get the trail maps on the town web page, on our web page, or a QR code. So, or a combination, whatever people think.
So I was about to say,
QR
I was about to say, this is great, you should put a QR code there so people don't have to type in that.
Yeah,
I love
so,
that.
but that's like a tree, and then, so it's just really the concept. Do you think that's a good idea, that, you know, something to hand out
Yeah.
to promote that we, you know, we have trails in Newmarket, we have them on our webpage, stuff we're doing. If so, I'll work with the library and we can come up with something. I'm hoping that they will, we didn't talk about money, I'm hoping that they will be able to print them, but if not, we'll figure something out, so. Anyway, the idea about it. Yeah. So that was just, I wanted to share that. Thank you, and, okay, yeah, so those were just events I wanted to, oh, sorry,
There's
go
also
that.
down there.
Thank you.
So cute.
Okay, so let's, land stewardship, we'll continue on with that. So Piscataqua River Loiselle entrance sign, again, Melissa's been working on that. The sign is done. I think there's some sleeves that the sign company's looking for and can't find yet. And I think she's gonna see if they will install it, or if DPW, obviously it's either DPW or them. So, we're still waiting to hear on that.
Timberline?
I think so.
They do installations, right?
I think
didn't
sign
even know.
companies usually do installations. They might charge a lot, so it's a matter of whether Rick can do it or whether, they'll come back to us
I want to
with
get
more
the
money.
other one to show you.
That's
this
really
one.
We figure a sign company would install.
Yeah.
Just never thought
Yeah.
about it.
Wigan Farm, we had an amazing work day, to extend the bridge and the boardwalk. Sam was there with his daughter, worked on the sign, we moved the sign. It's shorter, awesome. Near the entrance where Rick Malasky actually suggested, and we thought it was a great location. Colin was there, amazing work with this family with 2 boys that were just amazing.
That's great.
Tom and Melissa Sharples were there, and we built like 45 or 50 feet of boardwalk.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It was great. It was really good. So thank the people that came out there, and
How did we get that family to
Nature
volunteer?
Groupie, so I posted on Nature Groupie, which is the UNH volunteer
Yeah.
web announcements, and
Yeah.
then people can sign up through that.
Yeah.
But they're also, maybe you told, they're your neighbor, right?
I didn't tell them, but they are my neighbors.
Yeah. So, that was cool.
And he works for NOAA.
Yeah, so he, I think we should have him as the speaker. He works for NOAA Fisheries on whale entanglement.
Yeah.
So that seems like a good follow-up to Gabby's presentation
Yeah.
on microplastics, so maybe
Right.
we'll get him to come in and talk to us. So, as you may know, that the kiosk blew over in the wintertime, and DPW came and took away the kiosk, which is great. So thank you, DPW, for that as well. I think I sent you in the packet an idea for a kiosk. I was thinking of something much lighter and smaller, because we didn't really need that big of a kiosk. What I sent around, the one with the one panel, which I kind of like, I think we could just do one panel. And it's, this is over at the Manchester Cedar Swamp. If you've never been there, they have amazing kiosks and signage, and it's an accessible trail. But, so the construction's it's a tongue and groove. It's kind of, it's sort of simple, but then the top, this is from a different kiosk, so the top would be simpler and would be like a metal roof. And the thing I like about these two combined, it's a much lighter kiosk. So we could, volunteers, like we could put it up.
Right.
And we have the UNH student interns in June for 4 or 5 days, and I thought one of the things we could do is actually build this kiosk with them. So that would be in June 5th. And I haven't spec'd out, but I think it'll be $500 or less. I think probably less than $500. But so I was wondering if we could, if you like the concept, I still have to, we'll sketch out and Vic, who is forgot to mention Vic, who was there, a volunteer. He would, I'm sure, be happy to help with the construction. So if you would be willing to approve up to $500 for the materials from the conservation fund for the kiosk, then I will move forward with working on the design and getting the materials, and we'll do it in June.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to expend up to $500 from the conservation fund for building the Wigan Farm kiosk.
Great, thanks, Sam. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie. Any more discussion? All in
That's great.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. And I'll certainly keep you posted on the dates if anybody wants to join us for any of those days, because I haven't quite sure what all we're going to do, but it will be lots of different things.
So do we have somebody to design the graphics on it? Or-
Usually that's been me.
Yeah.
But I take that back. So I have done old one. I did the original one for there. But we've hired, because we've gotten grants for Heron Point and Sliding Rock now. And so I sort of work up the text and
Yeah.
images, and she does a draft. She's
Yeah.
a graphic designer, and then share it with everybody to see what do you think.
Yeah.
So I think I can figure out the size, what I think, and kind of roughly the material, but no, I think we should hire her again to do
Yeah.
it. So it's, the design's consistent, and it looks nice.
Yeah.
I think we need to take
That's
that,
great.
but I don't think we need that, I think we can build it, figure out, we'll know what the size is, but we can vote on that, I think, next time.
Curiosity, it's kind of a strange question, but they always have a roof, and like back a while ago, people weren't printing on metal and printing on plastic the way
Mhm.
we do now. It was like usually a sheet of plastic over a bunch of paper, and the roof kept the water
Mhm.
from getting all over the paper.
I know your
So
question.
why do we still do, I know it looks kind of neat, like a little house-ish like
That's a
thing,
great
but-
question. I
but
saw
why
a
still do
kiosk that
roofs?
didn't have a roof, and I thought, we don't need a roof on a kiosk.
Because a lot of times people put like some sort of shingle, and there's more
Uh-huh.
nails, and it's just like more kind of material.
Yeah,
Just
well,
sits
if you
there.
don't think,
Good
because
point.
there is I think there's one.
Yeah, birds live on it, which is good.
Yeah, but it does, it's like, there is no point. If
If
you
it's
don't-
all-
If it's all, because it's completely,
You just need a
white.
cap for the top of the post.
Yeah.
Like the
Okay.
metal caps for the top or something.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Vic, who was a volunteer, was out there, he said, why don't we just put the kiosk on the back of the entrance sign? And I said, well, I won't think, well, look too nice, but we could
Right.
just do 2 posts, and, sort of a similar kind of concept. So, I
Yeah,
like it.
I'm not throwing out the idea of a roof, I think it looked neat, but I was just
Well,
kinda curious.
I'll explore both
Like the
options.
Selt one on Neil Mill Road, the
Yeah.
roof is
It
like
has
this,
nothing else.
it's like this wide.
Yeah,
It's like that doesn't do anything but
Yeah.
keep the top of the post dry.
yeah.
It
Well,
looks nifty.
I'll work up some stuff, and I may just do it through email. We've approved the money, but if you guys wanna just, quick get a look to make sure you think it'll look good. But it certainly makes it a lot easier if you don't have a roof. And there's some really nice designs of ones without roofs, so. Great.
Yeah, this Morrison town, this looks nice. This
If
looks
you
super
would
nice.
indulge me, but you can decide. So in our general fund budget, which expires June 30th, which is in a month and a half, we have a supply line, general supplies balance of $123. So that money goes away, goes back into the general fund. But it is our line item, so we could buy supplies like GRK screws and just to have on extra repair materials for things. If you think that would be a fair thing to do. $123.30. So we could say up to $100 in for supplies?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did,
I
okay.
don't know how he's going to buy it.
Okay.
There's 4 committees. I don't know how much he's going to get.
Oh, that's good. No, how much did you ask? So
Well, I needed about $90 in ink and it was a paper so much I can, but I also need some folding fibers.
okay.
So,
Why don't we
it
ju-
won't be very much for, it'll probably be, $100 for everything, 125 for
Okay.
everything for all 4
Okay.
committees.
Why don't we say that, because we won't have any other expenditures between now, so why don't we just say the balance of what Melissa will, or what Sue will need for supplies, and we'll use the rest for buying hardware for our projects.
You don't have lots, but you
That sounds
can
good.
take a lot of it.
That's good. You can buy a lot of, screws are expensive, actually. That's why I wanted to, it's like a good opportunity, so. Okay, so let's, if we could take a motion to use up the balance of the supply budget on hardware for our projects after Sue's supplies are paid for.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second? Second by David. Thank you. Any discussion? So this is from the general fund. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's see. Right, so May 26th is Newmarket Cares Day. That's when we have the high school students. And it's the same group I had last year at Heron Point. Silas is last name the teacher. We'll have students, and we're going to be at Wigan Farm. And I think we're just going to, it's like for 2 or 3 hours, and I think we're going to stay in the parking area because there's stuff to do there, like raking back the gravel, it's the plows push it off, and then there's some limbs to trim up with hand saws. We might do some roadside cleanup if nobody did that. I might show them some invasive work, so it's kind of that sort of thing. But it's a Friday morning, so if anybody's interested, I'll,
What's the date again?
May 26th. I think 8:30 meeting there. So. And then again, we have the interns, UNH interns, which are usually very knowledgeable and great, really interested in learning both about nature and identifying plants, but also learning all of this kind of stuff and building things and doing invasive work. So that's June 5th through 7th, and then probably the Monday, Tuesday, which will be the 10th and 11th perhaps. And we'll probably be at Wigan Farm. We'll probably go to, might do a little bit at Heron Point. Anyway, wherever we have projects to do. So. Okay, so that's that. Dearborn, we're still waiting for, now it's still at the Attorney General's office for review. And I'm sure they have lots of important things, so we're kind of down here. But Fish and Game keeps pushing to get that reviewed. Once it's reviewed and all set, everybody can sign it, and we'll get that done. Okay, I think that is everything. If anybody has anything else they want to bring up?
I did want to mention, I am the piping clover monitor for Fish and Game this season, and
Nice.
I don't know if I can share with the entire board if anyone's interested in training to monitor piping clovers this summer. It can be exciting. I just wanted to put it out there. We will be training our volunteers soon. The chicks should be hatching that first and second week of June. I found 6 nests on Hampton Beach so far.
Wow.
And still counting the Seabrook ones, so,
Oh.
yeah. If that's something that
Mhm.
the board would be interested in, I'd be happy to share when our training day is, or take
Yeah.
anybody out there to meet the birds.
Nice, that's great.
Is that something that, is that something we post on the Facebook page? Or?
Yeah, you wanna send,
I don't know if I wanna share it that far.
Yeah.
That's what
Cause we only have a group of 10 volunteers
Yeah.
right now, so we
Mhm.
kinda keep it close-knit,
Yeah, yeah.
really specific, intentional data.
Mhm.
That people are like very
Yeah.
dedicated to
Yeah,
it,
good
so
point.
it's a good idea, and I thought
Yeah.
about the New Hampshire birding group too, but then I'm like, I don't know if I wanna get an overflow of people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, just reaching out to trusted people who might be interested
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah, feel free, you know, we can't respond via, a group, but if you wanna email the commission, you have all the emails, but just say, you know, obviously if you wanna respond directly to
Yeah,
you, that's
or if
fine.
you know anybody
Yeah.
who's really into birds, or the
Mhm.
shorebirds in particular, you know, send them my way.
Mhm.
I'd love to take on a few more volunteers for that.
Great. Awesome. Anybody else?
Just gonna throw 2 things out quick.
Sure.
One would be, thank you, I believe, to Tony Weinstein for organizing roadside cleanup.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
happened, in April,
Mhm.
and, sounds like it was a pretty big success. You know, Ash Swamp Road looks a lot better from
Mhm.
someone did down toward the end. We did some,
Mhm.
it seemed like someone else did another area. There's one area left of Ash Swamp that I think I might try to tackle one of these days,
Mhm.
because it's like you drive, it's like, oh, the road's so clean, and then you hit the spots that haven't, the one spot that hasn't been done. And the other thing, it was pointed out to me again that, that there was an issue at the town of Effing's wastewater treatment facility.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which released some effluent into the Lamprey River, which caused the town of Durham to no longer draw water from the Lamprey River. And I was asked if the town of Newmarket was going to issue any sort of advisory, or if there's any reasoning. I don't know if anyone's heard anything, or that was kind of a question and awareness point. If anyone's heard anything about the water quality effect in town here, because you know
Yeah.
the Durham withdrawal site's not that far upstream.
Yeah.
It's probably only like 3 miles upstream.
Yeah, I had heard that, and I was just assuming that somebody was testing it in Newmarket, but
Yeah.
that might not be a good assumption.
Yeah, because we don't get our water from, it's all groundwater, but
Right.
for swimming or
Yeah, for
boating or
swimming,
fishing
boating,
or,
fishing, yeah, that's
but
what
that
I
would
was-
probably be DES, maybe that would, we can, you want me to email Sean and see?
see if they,
You could do that, and then I can forward, let people
Yeah,
know.
I think that'd be great. We were tempted to go swimming the other day, but
I probably would not do that,
The mouth closed. Tight.
yeah. Okay, anybody else? Great, okay, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
all right, all in favor, aye?
aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.